The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Welcome to Autism Live and to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. And Nancy is attempting to join, she says, and it says that she is backstage, Traven. So I'm not seeing her, but we think she's there with us somewhere. So if you can check with her as to why it's saying she's backstage, I'm not sure. But Nancy is away, and so she was joining via a different way. So I think that could be answering some of our technical difficulties here. But I'm here. I'm Shannon Penrod, and Nancy's here somewhere, and hopefully going to join us soon. So excited to be here with you on this wonderful Friday. Today is August 13th. 2021, and I know that many of you, your kiddos are back to school today, and that just takes my breath away. I just can't even get over that. So we got a lot that we're going to do here today on the show. Certainly, I'm sure that'll come up in topics. We've got some in the news that Nancy and I want to share with you. And then a little bit later on in the program, Vince Redmond, licensed marriage and family therapist, is going to be here with us. Our topic today is talking about what we do Traven just pointed out to me that it's Friday the 13th, and I didn't realize that before. Thanks now, Traven. I'm like reading that question. So anyway, yeah, no, I didn't realize that it's Friday the 13th. Well, that explains a lot, doesn't it? In any case, so Vince is going to be here with us. We're not going to talk about it being Friday the 13th, although I guess that could come up. Really, what we're going to be talking about today is what you do when you're not able to access enough or any quality ABA therapy, and the feelings and the frustration and the grief and the guilt and all the things and the anger that, frankly, that comes up with all of that, because we always here want to deal with and accept the feelings and not poo-poo them. We know that that's not the way to deal with our feelings here, but to acknowledge them and go, yep, we're feeling this, but then maybe find a pathway of what's possible. And that's going to look different for different people. So we're going to talk about that with Vince. We really need a licensed marriage and family therapist to talk about that with us, because I don't know about you, but the emotions go, wah, right? And then they're like this mess that I don't know what to do with it. And then we have to shape it into, all right, what are we doing? And then we get on the pathway, and then it's more manageable. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I do want to point out that we're live this entire hour. Well, fingers crossed, right? If the internet gods are with us, we will be live the entire hour. And we're live on a lot of different platforms right now. We're live right now on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook Live, and we're also live on our homepage, autism-live.com, as well as a bunch of other places that Traven will list here on the screen for you. So hopefully you guys will be able to find places to be. Good morning, Christina. I hope you're feeling well. We've been sending you lots of good mojo, juju. What is the thing? Sending it to you, though. Love and healing. I also want you to know that this show is a podcast. It's a free download wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, Traven, I hope you're seeing that Nancy says that she needs to be added. So this is a free podcast. We are the number one. I don't know why you wouldn't base it on today, how this is going today, but we are the number one rated autism podcast worldwide. And it is a free download. We are really committed here to providing information and inspiration to people around the world who are looking for answers and connection and hope. We welcome everyone here, and you don't have to have a credential to be here. You don't have to have a diagnosis of autism to be here. But of course, we always say that individuals that have a diagnosis are the beating heart, the center of our community. We welcome you here. We want to hear your voice in whatever way you communicate, and we want to hear your point of view on things. But we also welcome everyone who loves you. Everyone who loves individuals who are on the autism spectrum is welcome here. And if you're just coming to that love and it's new to you, that's okay. Welcome. Claim your seat. Let's be here together. Let's hold hands, because you know what I always say here, si se puede. We can do this. We can. But I think it's wrong to think that anybody can do this by themselves. I don't know anybody who has been successful at being able to do this by themselves. I think we all need people to help us and to shore us up and to provide that safe place to fall, you know? And so we want that to be that here. We lovingly say that we're not all going to agree. How could we? We're all individuals and everybody needs something different. This can't be a one size fits all community, but bring yourself, bring all the baggage that you have and all the hopes and dreams that you have. And we just want to be welcome and accepting of everyone's ideas, their thoughts, their feelings, how they express themselves, what they're frustrated with. Everybody is entitled to their story. Yes. So we got a refresh here. Are we going to pause for that? And are you going to do it right now, Traven? He's going to refresh. If you lose me for a second, hopefully I'll be right back. But we're trying to see what we need to do to get Nancy in the story here. Oh, you already did it. We refreshed. I didn't notice it. It did not work. So I'm going to let him work on that because we're pressed for time. I'm going to go ahead and start talking about our news stories and hope that we can get Nancy Allspot Jackson in here on location because she's away. And that's part of why we're having difficulties this morning. So we're working on it, Nancy. First story that we got two stories that we're bringing you today from a wonderful, wonderful news outlet called Spectrum. And you can Google that, spectrumnews.org, if you want to go directly. And they carry a wide variety of news. And today we have two stories from them. And often we have stories for them because sometimes it's a story that appears on lots of other outlets, but I just like the way Spectrum, consolidates and sometimes includes information and context that is meaningful to us here. So really love Spectrum News. Give them a check out. But today, the first story from them is entitled "Large Study Strengthens Link Between Autism." Nancy! We got her. That's amazing. That's so
Hi.
Cool. I feel like as excited as if I was in the room with you. That was
I'm so excited. I'm coming to you from Big Bear. So you see the stone fireplace in back of me. I was outside, but it was a little too warm out there, so I came inside for you.
It's gorgeous, and you're gorgeous. I'm so glad that you're here.
So where are we, Shannon?
Well, you missed all the stuff about where to watch us, and now we're at the point we're on the first news story, which is the Spectrum News large study strengthens link between autism and preterm birth. And I just introduced it.
Surprised me because I have had many friends that have had premature children that have children on the autism spectrum, and I've long suspected this from my own evidence with this.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've heard this story in a lot of different iterations. What's different in this particular study and article is that I think we're really drilling down and honing in on what the moment is. And that it seems that I believe that the article says that it's anybody born before the 37th week of gestation is at a significantly higher risk for autism. That's the first time I've heard it that specifically. How about you, Nancy?
It's the first time I've heard it that specifically too. And this is the largest scale study that's ever been done on this. So they went to great lengths to get this information. Yes. And one of the things that I've often wondered, well, they're saying, first of all, that it's roughly 30% have a higher chance of having autism than those born full term. And I don't know, Shannon, have you ever heard whether they've done a study on in vitro and autism? Because that's one I'd be interested to see as well, because a lot of premature births are from in vitro.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have heard that anecdotally, but I'm not aware of a study. We should let our research team know that that's something we'd be interested in.
Yes, I'd be interested in that.
You know, because I think that that's an interesting thing. What I love about this and saying that, look, 30% higher risk before the 37th week, I think that that will resonate with a lot of people in a lot of different ways, so that people listen. You know, we've all been aware of people who decide that they're going to have, I think doctors try not to have this happen, but there are people who decide that they're pregnant and they're done with it. And they, you know, there's always been this thing about if you've gotten to the 35th week that it's relatively, you know, lower risks if you do a scheduled C-section. In fact, doctors don't want you to wait for a scheduled C-section all the way to the 40th week. But knowing that you don't really want to do it before the 37th week because that there are some risk factors, but there are times when a baby, of course, has to be born with before the 37th week. And if that's the case, then that child should receive additional screening to catch it early so that we can do early intervention and perhaps help them so that they don't get further behind than they might have otherwise. So I thought that was a really strong takeaway. Because you know me, a lot of times these studies, I'm like, yes, and duh. But now having that information, you know, it always used to be that, you know, you wanted to get past a certain week because of this development, and you wanted to get past a certain week because of the lungs, and you wanted to get past another gate. Well, now we have one more piece of information that we know it's best to make it to past the 37th week because you have a higher risk for autism. So I'm deeply appreciative, but people can check that out at Spectrum News, spectrumnews.org. I want to move on to this study. We're going to get to another Spectrum story in a second, but I want to move on to this very interesting study about how we sing and if that is a predictor of autism. Do people on the spectrum sing differently than people not on the spectrum? What did you think about this study, Nancy?
I thought it was really interesting. The differentiation between how those on the spectrum sing and those who are not on the spectrum sing. I'm trying to look at the two different forms of vocal imitation. It's pitch.
Yes. Absolute pitch and relative pitch. Never heard of these terms before.
Right. Right. I've never heard those terms used before. And they used an example of the nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb, and the differences between how those on the spectrum sang this song and those not on the spectrum.
Yeah. And I'm not sure, like, because I'm not a music person. And like I said, I've never heard the term absolute pitch and relative pitch. I've certainly heard perfect pitch before. And they're relating this to how we address language. That there are people who can sing Mary Had a Little Lamb, and they're not on pitch the whole time, but they get the gist of it, right? And then there are other, but if you were to tear it apart and say to them, no, I need you to sing this note on Mary and this note on Had and the Little Lamb, which is really what you do when you're doing an instrument, right? I immediately thought of when my son had to do, he was in a bell choir in grade school. And each person had to not only know their note, but know the timing. And it was specific. This note has to be here, or we don't get the tune. And so for people on the spectrum, it appears that they process the relative pitch, which is catching the tune and being relatively on pitch, or that absolute being able to pick it apart and just be on a note, in the right note, than people who are not on the spectrum. And that this correlates to being able to understand the gist of a language or understanding it if it's taken apart. I thought that was fascinating. I'm not sure that I completely understand it.
Right. I'm not sure that I do either. But as you said, the takeaway is that autistic participants perform better on imitating the structure of the tune. That's the relative pitch
Yeah.
than they did on the exact form, which is the absolute pitch.
And of course, whenever we see these studies, this brings up questions for me that I want to know, if that's the case, does it help our kiddos on the spectrum for them to learn an instrument where they are learning absolute pitch with a song? Like, I know that I had a hard time understanding grammar. I think I had a bad teacher. I didn't really get it. It wasn't until I began learning to speak Spanish. Like, I didn't understand past perfect and all those tenses until I was learning Spanish. And then it helped me to understand the English language better because I was understanding the language. I had something to compare it to. I'm wondering if this is the case with our kiddos, what happens when we give them an instrument where they have to get to absolute pitch? But that's not what the study is about. But these are the things that my inquiring mind lays awake at 2:00 in the morning and goes, I wonder if they looked at it that way. But I do think that this is just another piece of information that helps us to understand how an autistic brain functions differently. This is something Temple Grandin has been talking about for a long time. That, you've heard me talk before to kids when parents come up and say, can you please explain autism to our neurotypical child who has a sibling on the spectrum? And the thing that I always say is that it's like one is a Mac and one is a PC. I don't think that anybody should be talking about this one is better than that one. They process things in a different way. But if we give the right apps, both can get there.
Right.
And this might just be another app that people on the spectrum process the sounds of language and musicality in a different way than people who are not on the spectrum.
Right.
Not better or worse, just different.
Different.
Interesting. Okay, so now let's talk about sleep. Nancy, what's your sleep like? Do you have insomnia? Are you a good sleeper?
I am now a good sleeper. It takes me a little bit of time to fall asleep, but once I fall asleep, I sleep straight through the night. That wasn't always the case. I suffered from insomnia about 4 years ago and had difficulty sleeping, but